Hello, Sean here. I've got an article for you. This is from Courthouse News Service. This is from Sunday, April 19th, 2026. So this just happened. It says Montana High Court affirms block on binary sex definition. The Montana Supreme Court found the state constitution bars the state from only allowing cisgender residents to change their gender identity on their documents. Now, when I see this flag, this is like the trans flag. That tells me right there where these people's allegiance is. Their allegiance is not to the United States. Their allegiance is to like this cult of sexual identity. It's really just like another facet of Marxist revolutionism, and they have their own flag. It's like this is their nation. This is what they represent. They represent an idea that is counter to the United States. So just wanted to make a note on that. But yeah, I mean that flag might as well have a hammer and sickle on it, honestly. Okay, so the article says transgender discrimination is by its very nature sex discrimination. This is according to Montana Supreme Court Justice Lori McKinnon. And that was written on behalf of the majority, probably a woke lefty would be what I imagine. It says discrimination based on sex is expressly prohibited under Montana's unique non-discrimination clause. These laws were not meant to be twisted in this way. Like a law like that is like non-discrimination laws are meant to be non-discriminatory towards like men and women, and then the radical trans people come in with their argumentation. It's just intentionally meant to twist these laws around. I mean, it's like trying to put men and women into each other's sports and things. Yeah. So, okay. So it sounds like there was a legal change that happened here. Okay. So it talks about enacted in 2023 by the Montana legislature that Senate Bill 458 defines sex as binary and based on biological and genetic indications present at birth. Shortly after it went into effect, the Department of Health and Human Services announced it would stop amending birth certificates based on gender transition, gender identity, or change of gender. So they make a law that says that things have to go by whatever your biological sex is. And so they're not going to be changing documentation based on gender, sex. I'm going to call it sex mutilation surgery because that's what it is. Identity changes. You know, it's so funny how they throw around the differences between gender and sex. They'll go, well, gender is different from sex, and they'll try to argue it that way. But then they want the sexual identity to be the thing that's changed on the identification. And of course, when it comes to the surgeries, then it's what is being changed. Like the biological sexuality is the thing that is attempted to be changed to the hormones and the surgeries. So it's no longer this amorphous, ethereal gender thing that's just in the mind and the sense of self. No, all of a sudden it actually does mean sex when they want it to mean sex, but I digress. This law that they enacted in 2023 sounds very reasonable. It sounds like a way that they were trying to enforce biological reality, scientific biological reality. Okay, now going on, and it says that in 2024, two transgender Montanans sued the state, arguing the policies violate the state constitution. Specifically, the plaintiffs requested that they be able to amend the sex designation on their birth certificates. So they want to falsify their birth certificates to something that is not. They want to go back in time, change something that they don't like, that the birth certificate is proof of what they biologically are. So they want to change that and falsify that. and their driver's license. Designation on the birth certificate and driver's license is permitted under the state's previous policy. Okay, yeah, the law changed. They changed the law, right? Like states have a right to change the law. So apparently they were able to sue over the law being changed. When obviously what it was before was ridiculous. If it was allowing this, it was ridiculous. And so the state goes, no, it's going to be biological. And then they go, well, that's violating the Constitution. Well, that's absurd. Okay, so at the end of the year, a lower court issued a preliminary injunction blocking the state from enforcing the policies. Okay, so you get a lefty court in here that goes, oh, enforcing that you can't falsify documents to be different than by your biology, that's a bad law. You're not going to be allowed to enforce that. The court found that cisgender and transgender residents are equivalent in all relevant respects other than their status as transgender or cisgender, but only cisgender Montanans can amend their birth certificates or driver's licenses to accurately reflect their gender identity, which violates the constitutional right to be free from discrimination on the basis of sex. Again, this absurdity of taking non-discrimination laws, this is like the camel in the tent. These non-discrimination laws, it's like they had good intent, right? You shouldn't be allowed to discriminate against people because of their sex or their race, things like that. There's good basis in things like that. And the Marxist leftists see opportunity in here then. How do we use something that was intended for good and flip it into something that's intended for evil and something absurd? So they're basically saying that because there's a made-up phony identity called trans identity, which is like there used to be like transsexual and transvestite, and these were, these were different terms. I don't think people thought too much about what these things meant. It's like guys pretending to be women and dressing up like women and dressing in drag and different things like that, cross-dressing, all is in this like transsexual, transvestic fetishism area. And then it was all just kind of lumped together under the title of trans, as if they're like transhumanism, something other than human, some sort of different phase of human is what it kind of sounds like it's trying to convey, transing into something else. And really all it is it's the people that dress up in they dress up in the opposite sex, maybe, and call themselves a made-up identity. And they want to be treated different because of this make-believe thing that they're doing and dressing as, and then consider themselves different from the people who aren't confused, the people who aren't pretending to be the made-up identity. And they give us the derogatory, the libs give us the derogatory label of cisgender. If you're just a normal person, all of a sudden you have to get a weird label too, so that they don't have to be alone in the weird label that they made up of trans and non-binary and all that crap. But so they label us cis and go, look, well, there's cis people and trans people. So, well, the cis people are being treated different than the trans people, and even though these are just made up terms and categories and it's all just people and the law applies to all of these people the same, if we just create a false name and identity around it, then we can say that it's different. And so the state appealed it. Saying that the lower court abused its discretion by blocking these policies. There it is, blocking these policies. That the lower court, so the lower court tries to block the law from taking place that's going to make people's ID fit with their biology. The lefties block it. Then the state comes along and goes, no, you're going beyond you're abusing your authority, your discretion by blocking this. Then comes the obviously liberal Montana Supreme Court and its supremely stupid argument. They argued lest the state's highest court found the two plaintiffs have a vested and deeply personal stake in the ultimate outcome of the lawsuit, as they must disclose they are transgender each time they present their identifying documents, and those documents do not reflect who they believe they are. Who they believe they are. The documents won't reflect who they believe they are. I'll talk more about the ridiculousness in that statement in a moment. Okay, so the Montana Supreme Court is defending the gender-confused people's claim of discrimination because their legal identification, their driver's license, would identify them as they biologically truly are and not by who they believe they are. Unless they must tell someone that. Well, it's a guy faking being a woman. He's dressed up in drag, he's faking being a woman. And so he shows the police officer his ID, and it says he's a man, but it's not who he believes he is. So then he must tell the officer that, oh, he actually believes he's a woman, as if his make-believe false sense of self is going to be at all relevant to that. As if people's make-believe world is at all relevant. Oh, the ID isn't really who I am. It's not who I believe I am. The Supreme Court of Montana is arguing that, like, oh, the tragedy that people would have to go, I don't really believe I'm the thing that I biologically am on my ID. Oh, it says I'm 6'2". I don't actually believe I'm 6'2". I'm actually 6'5". Oh, it says I have green eyes, but I actually believe I have yellow cat eyes. Oh, it says my skin color is white, but actually I believe I'm one of the blue avatar Navari people. And so that's not really what I believe I am. I actually don't even, it doesn't say it on the ID, but I actually don't believe I'm human. So I must let you know that. And I'm being discriminated against because I must let you know that my ID is telling you what I actually am, but it's not what I believe I am. I'm being discriminated against because my legal ID doesn't tell you what I make believe myself to be in my head. That's how this Supreme Court argued. Oh my gosh. This is the left. This is the left. Okay, so going on with my thoughts on this, for one thing, it's usually pretty obvious when someone is claiming the amorphous trans or non-binary false identities, because it's usually it's usually pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious by how they dress up, how they cut their hair, the makeup they wear and or are not wearing, or whatever. Like the way that they display themselves makes it very clear when they're trying to be the opposite. At least when they care enough to do that, because there's times when people don't. I mean, there's like lazy trans out there that it's just like they're not even trying to pass. It's like it's just a guy, and he's just going, well, it's fluid right now, I guess. Just claiming to be whatever, just like in the moment. And so you don't actually have to. It's all based on fashion. Then yeah, you don't even have to do that because you can just claim it at any time. You can just claim it. But it's so very highly rooted in the visual presentation. I mean, it really is. Trans is just fashion, and Jordan Peterson pointed that out in his videos. I mean, it really is just, what are you wearing? How do you do yourself up to look a certain way? Which is that's ironic on other levels, but that's a rabbit hole. But another point is that on the point of, well, they must tell somebody who they really believe themselves to be. Well, no, actually, it's really obvious to us. Humans are really good at detecting fakery. We're really good at detecting biological men and biological women. And until the recent confusion of the left perpetuating this on society in the West, it was pretty easy to do that. Now the fakery has, I'll give credit, the fakery has advanced. It can be harder, especially if they get people before puberty and do all the things. But uh, I think with a lot, you can just tell. You can just tell the human body, the mind, the way that I think God made us is that we're really good at detecting that kind of thing. The evolutionists would say, well, we're evolutionarily inclined to that. I'd say we're designed that way, but we can tell. Humans can tell what a man is, what a woman is, and so we can see through this. So actually, we don't need you to tell us if you're trans. If you're presenting yourself in any way in that way, we're going to already probably be able to realize that about you. And also, we don't care. We don't care. You don't need to tell us at all. It doesn't matter. If you're presenting your ID for something, the only thing that matters is what you biologically are. It doesn't matter what you're thinking in your head you are. It doesn't matter if you think you're a cat. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you think you're Napoleon. Doesn't matter. Well, it might matter in some contexts, but in a lot of contexts, it's not going to matter at all. It's whatever's going to matter is going to be what's legally on that ID. You're proving who you are. It's meant to identify you. Okay, and so moreover, this false sense of self, this fake belief of oneself, you wouldn't have any legal obligation to report that. The Court of Montana is saying, well, then you must tell people that. Like, you don't have to tell people that. You're under no legal obligation to tell people the false, inaccurate, misleading beliefs that you have about oneself. You have to show your ID to the doctor's office or to a law enforcement officer or something, and then tell them all the fake beliefs that you have about yourself. If anything, you'd have a Fifth Amendment right to not have to tell people what you think you are, or what sex you think you are, or gender you think you are. They don't need to know that. You don't have to tell them that. It's not relevant. It's probably not relevant. If it is relevant, you should probably go with whatever your biological sex is. If you're going to a doctor's office or a hospital to get needing some sort of medical care, you should probably go with what the biology is, and don't tell them your pretend make-believe identity. In any case where it would be relevant, it would probably be better to go with what are you actually, and not what is your make-believe identity. That one doesn't matter. Same with going to the bathroom, going to the gym, going to the lockers, going to the sports team. Go with your biological one, not the one you pretend to be and dress up as. Also, trans is not some monolith. And it's also, I think, a misconception that they believe themselves to be the opposite sex. I think rather that's actually propaganda from the likes of like the WPATH Files people and just the radicals in the movement, the Marxists, who frame these arguments to be very sympathetic to soft, bleeding heart liberals who take in their arguments. Now, these people are people with transvestic fetishes who get off on dressing like women. They have onogynephilia. They want to look like women or act out things that are feminine things. They may have trauma histories. They may be giving into social contagion, the popularity of this thing, especially if they're young people or women, young girls, going through puberty, that sort of time period, maybe having anxiety, mental health issues, uncomfortable with your body, experiencing dysphoria with your body. There's people with autism who struggle in the areas of understanding their sexuality and can get caught up into the trans, non-binary movement stuff in ways that they never would have if this whole ideology hadn't been created in academic circles in the past century or so, and was mulling about back there in academia before breaking out just in the past like 2 decades into, and really just in the past like 15 years or so, it seems like it's really exploded into the culture. People would, that none of this was a thing in the past before the intelligentsia created this nonsense. This whole trapped in the wrong body thing is really just jumping off of like the gay rights movement. It's like, well, argue that you're born that way and that it's inherent. So say that about your trans identity too, except when it's fluid, except when you don't feel like it, except actually when people regret their hormones and their surgeries and go back. Well, whoopsie. I guess it wasn't that. Well, they're talking about gender anyway, which is different than sex and blah blah blah. Okay, what else do I want to say on this? And I'm going to keep going with the article, but the notion that somebody uncomfortable with their body for whatever reason who's sexually aroused by dressing in the opposite sex's clothing, or the thought of looking or acting like that sex, and even takes the wrong hormones or gets sexually or surgically disfigures their bodies. The notion that there's somehow a different class of human being because of these things. Because they believe this, because they even do these things to their body, the notion that they're this trans class of human being, that we're going to call them an entirely different thing, we're going to legally categorize them as a different thing, just because they are either confused or caught up in some sort of sexual paraphilia, or experiencing a dysphoria, like a mental health issue, that we would put them into some other category of person and legal category, and then treat them different, and rather claim really it's that they're being treated the same, and they want to be treated special. They want to claim that they're being discriminated against when they're treated equally. They don't want to be treated equally. They want to be treated according to their make-believeness. Is really just absurd. And in that sense, there is no trans. There is no trans. There are people with gender dysphoria disorders. There are people with trauma. There are people with fetishes. There are sexual perverts who are using this for their own gain on society, for their own exploitation. There are people with autism. There are people like experiencing these things, and it's not some monolithic thing. It's not something you can lump together as this one thing, nor is it a different type of person. So that's just my point, is that there is no trans, because it's actually just a bunch of different things that actually have their own labels, and none of which is a different type of person or category. And the whole thing is absurd. Again, that is propaganda from the left, from the movement, for the sake of getting what they want. It's a power move, ironically. And for all the left that talks about power and oppression, they like to manipulate things for the sake of power. But I digress. I'm going to go here. The article says our Montana Constitution requires the state to treat individuals with dignity, even as it exercises broad police powers, McKinnon wrote for the Supreme Court, right? That, quote, this bold constitutional proposition protects all individuals and does so equally. I'm going to go on to down here. It says today's opinions reflect what we all know to be true, that the Montana Constitution protects the human dignity of everyone, including transgender Montanans. Alex Raitt, Deputy Director of the ACLU Montana, said in a statement, says, quote, everyone deserves the equal protection of the law, and the policies that single out individuals or groups for discrimination and harassment will not withstand constitutional scrutiny, unquote. And I note here that they mention dignity and treating people equally here in both statements there. The ACLU statements and the statements up here from McKinnon, which I believe was one of those Supreme Court people. So first, my first point is that regarding dignity and equality, as they're claiming here, allowing a special group of people to falsely identify themselves because they dress up in a costume and want you to think that they believe a fantasy about themselves to be the opposite sex, or no sex at all, is not treating people equally. It's the definition of inequality. Everyone should be treated equally by their biological sex and accurately identified as such. Creating a class of people who simply get to claim that they are of some special group, simply claim to be trans, and voila, magically you have special rights to modify your biological identity on your ID or on your birth certificate. That is inherently discriminating against the normal, honest people who aren't playing dress up, who aren't confused, who aren't lying about their identity or lying to themselves. The cis people are being discriminated against here. And dignity, since when was dignity perpetuating people's lies and fantasies? Since when was that a matter of dignity? What about the dignity of what is actually true? What about the dignity of every single person, every government worker, every healthcare worker, every law enforcement officer, anyone who has to deal with the gender confused or gender deceiving people by referencing or acknowledging their false identity, by having to go like, this is who they are, by putting into computer systems, this is who they are, by having to refer to them as this is who they are, not because of who they biologically are, but who they make believe themselves to be. What about the dignity of compelling people to lie, to falsely document, falsifying documents, to violate their free speech and conscience and their faith to go along with this lie? What about the dignity of that? You've got a tiny percentage of people who are confused or lying or both, identifying as trans. The court is standing up for them against the vast majority of people, the cis people, who have to be, who will be compelled to go along with the lie. And that's dignity. That's equality. They don't care about the other Montanans who are offended by this, no doubt. And there's more irony. To violate the belief grounded in facts, grounded in reality, that the so-called trans person is in fact not the make-believe sex they are claiming, but are biologically a male or female. How is this dignity? To elevate a make-believe fantasy of one person over the belief of another. How is that dignity? Okay, if they believe something, they believe themselves falsely to be a cat person, a trans person, a Navari alien species person. They believe that, and I believe something else. I believe they're human. I believe they're what their biology is. The court has made the decision that for dignity and equality, they demand that the only belief that is the right belief is the belief that that person has about themselves. They get to self-define by their own belief, and everybody else has to subject their beliefs to that person's belief, regardless of how false and wrong it obviously is. How is making the trans person's belief superior to everyone else's beliefs equality? Does that make sense? This isn't dignity at all. It's a perpetuation of sinful, evil, demonic lies of the narcissistic fetishists, of perverts and radical Marxists on the left, who are more than happy to compel their lie on other people, especially onto conservative-leaning states, red states, through ideologically captured courts that have left reality behind, have left common sense, dignity, and equality behind, obviously, based on a ruling like this. I'll mention that the ACLU was founded by people with ties to communism, such as Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, according to AI, a prominent communist. I know I've read about her elsewhere, such as in the book The Devil and Karl Marx, I think makes mention of that person, or the communist connections to the ACLU. I note that because it does mention the quote from the ACLU here. Now, the ACLU will claim that they purged communism in the 40s and 50s, yet it's obvious from the sorts of cases that they, the sorts of opinions that they have, that they're guided by the regressive left's ideas, the Marxist ideas. And so I can only assume that they feigned giving up communist ideas back in that time, just as everyone was, because they didn't want to get labeled with as a communist anymore. Went under the term progressive instead to deceive people, so that soft-minded people, bleeding heart people who are inclined to liberal ideas would buy into the thoughts of communists without the communists having to call themselves or their thoughts as such. But I digress. I agree with the opinion of the dissenters here. Where's that opinion? Here it is. Supreme Court Justices Jim Rice and Corey Swanson both dissented. Rice described the decision as forcing the state to issue falsified legal documents, and Swanson took issue with the court's unnecessary engagement in lawmaking. It's absurd that the court ruled to make it legal to falsify documents for a certain set of people. I mean, that's just insane. And yet this is what the left does. They got the media, they got the universities, which are basically a petri dish of Marxism. They took the law schools. They produced lawyers and judges who are radicals with subversive agendas. And they're fulfilling Marx's purpose of the abolition of all social conditions. That's a quote from the Communist Manifesto, and they've been manifesting that. And they've been doing it through CRT, through critical theory, critical racist theory, all that nonsense. Marxism has gained new life and come out openly through these theories. Oppressor and oppressed comes back again. This is the deconstruction of America. This is what it looks like by judgments like this, by these radicals in these positions that violate their oaths of office, but they learn the legalese, they learn the argumentation, they learn to use words to undermine our laws and underline what our country is supposed to be about. They learn it in the law schools. They take it to these positions. And then all they've learned to do is weasel around, just slither around like snakes to eat away at our country through clever argumentation. So deceitful. My final thoughts are this. We need to take back these institutions. We need to undermine them as necessary, like pointing out how fraudulent and wasteful universities are. I mean, they're teaching nonsense and charging a lot of money for it. Their administrations grow, the cost goes up, the government makes it worse by offering loans, the student loans that they do. And so the schools don't suffer it as people take these loans for BS degrees and then don't get any sort of productive jobs and can't pay them back. And then the taxpayer foots the bill. We need to produce our own institutions of learning. Red states need to fight tooth and nail to make their states hostile to Marxist regressive values so that liberals move out. Just as liberal states make it uncomfortable for conservatives and want to turn them into felons, such as through unconstitutional laws against the Second Amendment, I think red states need to push more for conservative values, make it uncomfortable to be a liberal, so that the liberal, leftist, Marxists feel like those states don't represent their values, so they'll move. They'll move to the blue states where they're going to get all the transgenderism, all the gun control, the taxes, the regulations, the welfare, the fraud, the baby murder, the crime, all that they can get. If they want it, they should go to the states to get that. But of course, there's still dug-in ticks. There's the people all throughout our governments, even in red states, who still have the regressive left-wing beliefs and are using their roles to undermine even the red states. So that's unfortunate. We need law schools that teach pro-American laws based on our founding principles, based on the things that make America great, and not on toxic Marxist systemic critical theory crap. So what do you think of this ruling? How can reality-based, patriotic, conservative, God-fearing Americans fight back against this stuff in Montana and in red states? Please leave a comment, like, subscribe, follow me here, and little faith tie-in. I need to remember that God is greater than the enemy and all the machinations, I don't know how to say that right. I think you can say it either way. All the wiles of the enemy will fall in the light of truth. So we need to keep fighting, keep speaking for truth, find your voice, find your role. And this is the role I'm taking by having a channel, speaking up on here. So need to look to God. Again, thanks for viewing. If you have, please like and whatever, leave a comment, and I'll see you next time.